Well, welcome everybody. This is our first forum done in a Zoom style, so just ask for a little bit of patience. There's a lot of faces on the screen today, so we'll just take things nice and slowly, and if we continue to raise our hands and keep to our meeting etiquette, things should go quite smoothly. So welcome everybody, and first off I'd like to open up our forum with asking Councillor Maxwell if he would open up with a karakia for us. Please, Trevor, would you do the honours?
So I've unmuted, can you hear me?
Lovely, thank you Trevor.
Okay, kia ora koutou. He inoi tātou. E te atua whakatū wharatia mai kia mātou ngā kua hao te tika. O te pono o te māramatanga i tēnei wāinga wā katoa. Ko ihu kraiti hoke to mātou kai whakaata. Amen. May the grace of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us now and evermore. Amen. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you, Trevor. And now I'd just like to hand over to Mary Pickett, if she would open up our forum today, please.
Oh, thank you, Una. Kia ora tātou katoa. Yes, well, this falls under this Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee area. So, yes, I will be chairing today, but obviously I will be heavily reliant on Una, as we do actually in our normal meetings, but particularly today, Una, because you can see what's going on and things that are coming through. But I would like to welcome the Mayor, councillors, and of course we do have representatives from our Lakes Rural Community Boards, and also to Tātou as well. So no mai hara mai, welcome to this forum today on the 23rd of April. So welcome. We have two invited, and particularly also to our staff, Ngā mihi. Of course, thank you very much for the hard work that you've been putting in, certainly to deliver us the background paper that we've had. And I do hope that everyone has taken the opportunity to read through that so that it can inform much of the discussion that we're going to have today. We do have two invited participants today, Garnish and Nana and John McRae. Tēnā korua, no mai hara mai, welcome to our forum today. And we certainly look forward to your participation in the panel, and not only that, when questions are asked of you with your expertise, and Garnish, nice to have you present with us. I've been at many conferences where you have been a speaker, and absolutely with everybody else applauded your contribution that we've heard over a number of years. So nice to have both you and John joining us today. We do have a full agenda. I have, and I hope that we'll have some good, full and frank discussions as well. But I have asked Una to ensure that everyone, as much as possible, gets an opportunity to speak. I would not like to see anybody hogging the airways. That's not what it's about. It's an opportunity for everybody to speak. And so, Una, could you please keep an eye on that when the names come through and the hands go up? It really is important that everybody who has the opportunity to have their comments and their views heard today by all of us. So thank you. I think I'll leave it there. And again, I am relying on you heavily, Una, and thank you, and to Kim today for being here to assist, and of course to the executive management team and to Jeff, who are taking part as well. But if I do have to come over top, I can do that, and so there's a facility for me to do that. So to everybody today, no mai hara mai, welcome, and I do hope we'll have some great discussion this afternoon. Kia ora. Thank you, Una.
Thank you, Mary Pickett. Thank you. So I'm just going to invite Jeff just to say a few words in terms of setting the scene for today's workshop, and then I'll go into introducing the panel that we have today. So Jeff, if you would like to come on. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks, Betty Peck, and thanks, Una. Look, today is a bit of an extraordinary forum for us, in that we're not only in unusual times, but we're also using very sometimes technology which isn't quite as easy and straightforward as what any of us would like it to be. But you'll recall that some weeks ago now, 3 weeks, you actually made a decision with respect to the framework of a recovery strategy. We then went on and actually did some more work, and you then approved the outline of the recovery strategy, the key elements of that. Now, of course, the recovery strategy, without the ability to fund it or for council to support it, is unlikely to be successful. And so our annual plan decision making is the key to actually identify what services council is going to provide, but also what funding will be available to council to undertake those services. Now, we're in unusual times, and normally we're in year 3 of an annual plan and it's all business as usual, but we're not. We're in a very unusual situation. And so what we need from you as a staff is clear direction as to what are the key strategies, what are the key directions that you want us to consider as we construct the financial model that underpins the annual plan. And so today what you'll be looking at is some directions and some ideas, some strategies. And what we hope by the end of this forum is that you'll be able to look at those, potentially to update or change or amend those, and through that provide us with some clear direction as to how do we go about constructing an annual plan for 2020-21 that is aligned to your expectations.
Lovely, thank you, Jeff. So I'm just going to, what we've got on the forum agenda now is a panel discussion opportunity. And we've got actually 4 people on the panel today. And I just want to make reference to the panel and to the paper. So the pre-reading paper that was sent out has had input from all of our panel members today. So I'll just, the majority of the members actually don't need any sort of formal introduction, but I'm just going to introduce really briefly each panel member. Each panel member is going to have 10 minutes to present to you, and really what their focus of their 10-minute presentation is going to be based around sort of a high-level question about what is happening around us and what council should be considering. So it's their reflections on that background paper. So first off, we've got Ganesh Nana, who I'm sure everybody has followed over the years, and his strong involvement with economics. And I was just reading up about him today, where it's not all just about numbers. His main focus is on people. And you'll all be aware that Ganesh is also now a board member on the Rotorua Economic Development Board. Our second presenter today is John McRae, and I'm sure he does not need any introduction to any of us. And as I'm sure everybody is aware, that John has just recently been appointed to the chair of the Rotorua Economic Development Board. And our third and fourth presenters, who are acting as a bit of a combo, we've got Tataru White and Peter Rice. And Tataru might do a little bit more of a background or introduction to Peter when we get to Tataru's time. So without further ado, I would like to ask Ganesh if he would like to turn on his mic, and we look forward to hearing from you, Ganesh. Thank you.
Thank you, and kia ora tātou. It's a bit of a difficult time to come and talk to you, and I think my role, and I'm, to be clear, not speaking as an RED board member, I'm speaking as myself, even though I've had input, and obviously I don't think the two are significantly different, but I just wanted to make that clear. and had the background paper that covers off, I think, a fair number of the issues that we all confront. But I think from my perspective, and I'm not pushing a barrel, and we're not after any consultancy work whatsoever, but there is a couple of articles on the Bill website that around the role of government, and in particular the role of local government, that's you may want to just have a cast your eye over. It's got the same similar themes, but more general. I think they're just picking out the key themes out of that conversation I think you need to be aware of, and you're probably already aware of it, but I just think we all need reassurance that we're not alone in this. One of them is undoubtedly just how big this is. And if we're not aware of that, and I don't think many are, because people are still talking about going back to normal or going to business as usual. And that's really quite, I won't say astonishing, but I think it's understandable, because people are after some reassurance that there's some going back to their comfort zone, and that there is going to be a back to normal. And I think that's just natural. But I think we as, I think as leaders, and this is where we do need to actually be leaders, have to realise just how difficult a time it is. And I don't want to go all gloomy on you, but I do have to, I suppose, share with you my realisation about how bad it was, which was, and I'll be honest, I was one of those, and not that long ago, one of those who were a bit very cynical of some of the conversations, and saying, yes, this is just another flu, and we've been through this before, we've been through SARS, and it was going to be the end of the world, and then Y2K and all of those sorts of things. And you know, I'm old enough and got enough grey hairs to know that we've had the end of the world forecast many times. And so I was basically saying, you know, we all know how many people die of the flu every year, and nobody worries about that, and so why are we concerned about that? And I think that was, I think, I'll be honest and fair, that's where I was up until relatively recently. But this is different, and I do recall myself, I suppose it was just before we went into lockdown, so that would have been about 4 or so weeks ago, and I turned to my partner here and made sure the children were out of earshot, and said bluntly to her, it says, I don't want to live through a depression. And that's what's staring us all in the face. And indeed, my generation, and I think many who are still alive, most who are still alive, we can say we actually have never had it. We have got no comparator to compare this with. We've never lived through a war. You know, some of us will have relatives that may have experienced the war, but we never ourselves have actually experienced that sort of scenario. And I've obviously done readings and heard from my parents about the depression and that sort of thing. And I don't want to go through that. And I think that's the realization that was going through my mind. And obviously I wasn't going to come out and say this is as bad as the depression. But then, and none of us wanted to say that, but the reality is there. And the IMF said about 3 days ago, came out with the statement that this is as bad as, this will be the worst thing since the Great Depression of the 1930s. So the world is just so uncertain. If we think we're going to know what's going to happen, if we are going to wait for information, if we want to wait for certainty, then we're fooling ourselves into thinking we're going to have that information in front of us. We are all we're all going to have to make decisions without that sort of information, without that certainty. And that's where I go back to my, and I'm a bit cynical about all of those courses that you were supposed to go through, whether it was management courses or business development courses or leadership courses. But one of the things that really did stick with me is whenever there's a crisis, the last thing you need to do is wander around like a bunch of chooks with your heads chopped off screaming, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. It may feel like that, honestly, and this is not a criticism of anybody. But this is a time for leadership. This is a time for leaders to stand up, and I include all of you in that conversation or in that definition. It's easy being leaders. It's easy being business owners. It's easy being councillors when times are easy, when the ocean is flat and there's no obstacles in the way. And if there are obstacles, we know about them, we can navigate around them. This is the difficult time, and this is when we need to stand up. And I think that the other critical thing is to know our objectives. Because, okay, we don't know what's out there, we're all uncertain about it, but we are clear on our kaupapa. That's what should be driving our decision making. It'd be nice to have the information, it'd be nice to be certain about the future, but those we have to put to one side. But we know, all of us, individually and collectively, have to be clear about what are we here for, why are we here, what is our kaupapa, because that actually doesn't change. You know, we spent however many years developing our kaupapa, going away on retreats and having a talk about our set of values and what drives our decisions, and those were always for the glossy brochures and the websites. But now's the time to actually dig those out and make sure that they are driving us. What is our set of values? What's our kaupapa? Why are we here? What are our objectives? For local government, it's relatively simple. It's the 4 well-beings. And I know it's an easy thing that rolls off the tongue, but now is the time to put those front and centre. And I put that clearly, even more important, none of those 4 well-beings is any more or less important than the other of those 4 well-beings in any other. All of those 4 are important. We can't put the individual ones in silos because that's the issue that we've had in the past. Now is the time to put all of those well-beings together. That's the critical role of leadership. From an economic perspective, government is going to be central for the next, I don't know how long, but definitely for the next 12 months, if not longer. I suspect longer, but definitely for the next 12 months. Government, I include local government in that phrase. Local government is just as important as central government. The big question mark, or the big holdback, of course, is that local government doesn't have the funds that central government can play with. And I think that's the critical element in here. And I think it's up to you as leaders and me as local government advocates to go front and centre to central government and put our case strongly that local government needs funds from central government, full stop. And use all of your powers with your local MPs and make sure they're in on this conversation through LGNZ and all of the neighbouring councils and everybody else. Local government's got a critical role to play. I think central government's overlooked it at the moment. It's got a few other things on its plate, admittedly, but I think it needs to be brought clearly, very quickly, that local government has the ability to engage with local businesses, with local SMEs a lot more closer than central government can. And you can provide that conduit. Government has to maintain the spending levels in the local community. I know that's easy to say, but that's the role, because businesses won't be able to, private sector businesses, and I'm not criticising them whatsoever, but SMEs have got way much more on their plate. They're worried about cash flow, they're worried about the next wage bill, and rightly so. Households, families, they're not spending, they're concerned and worried about their jobs. I'm not blaming them. So who's left? And that's where government fits in. Government has to. We've got no choice. Government's got to maintain that spending, and we can talk about how we fund it later, and I'm not being flippant, but I think honestly we need to do the spending now, and then basically go to central government and say, you told us we had to maintain spending, you told us we had to make sure we had the confidence of business. We played our role, now it's up to central government to play its role and fund it. Go through some technicalities if you like, but I think that's critical. The other element, the demand side is good. Yes, keep the spending, both CapEx and OpEx. CapEx is the easy thing, infrastructure projects, just list them all down and send the bill to central government. That's the easy bit. The OpEx thing is just as important. And this is the other well-beings. We understate the importance of the community infrastructure that we take for granted, the social networks. And this is from an economic perspective. And you all have your own perspectives, but from an economic perspective, if we are ever to get out of this, we have to make sure that those community networks and structures remain in place. So people, even if they've lost their jobs, still have a community to fall back on, still have those networks, those connections. They still feel included. If they remain included and connected, then when the jobs do open up, they'll be much quicker to take up those jobs. They'll be in a much better position to take up those jobs. If we cut off the community as well as the spending, then it's going to be much longer and much harder task for us for not just for businesses and the economy, but for society and community to pick up. And so that's the role of councils, is not just on the spending side, but to maintain that. It is that leadership role about signalling to community that we have a plan, we're going to be here, we're maintaining those social infrastructures, because there's going to be a future. That's part of that confidence building, or not building, but that underpinning the confidence in the locality, the community, the society. I've lost track of time, but I've probably spoken for there's many more things I could talk about. I'm more than happy to have a conversation afterwards with you.
I think that's spot on in timing. Thank you, Ganesh. Right, I'd just like to ask John McRae now if he would like to come on, and just so that everybody's quite clear, we're going to go through the presenters and then have questions and answers after all the presenters have had their 10-minute speaking time. So thank you. Over to you, John, please.
Yeah, thank you. Kia ora koutou, everyone. Look, I'll just go through three headings, actually. First, I'll just talk about the steering group and where we're up to that. And then I just want to spend a little bit of time on confidence and what that actually means and the importance of confidence. And then talk about the role of government. And when I use the term government, I use that with a small g, so that's central government and of course local government. So I'll with just an update on the steering group and sector groups that are being assembled by RED and supported by RED. We had a first Build Back Better business leaders meeting on Tuesday, which went very well. We managed to get the terms of reference agreed, and the development of the 4 sector groups were all supported. So good progress there. In fact, the next meeting is right now. It started at 2 o'clock, so I'm missing on that. Una, just before I do that, my internet connection's a little bit
Unstable.
Stable. Are you hearing this all right?
No, you are cutting out a bit. Yeah.
What I might do is I'll stop my video and just wave at me if it's still unstable.
Good. Good, John.
Very good. Now, obviously, all of us have limited time and resource, so therefore it's important that, like any organisation, we as RED do not spread ourselves too thinly, and that we do have an impact that matters. Therefore, the 4 sectors were selected, in our opinion, where we can have the greatest impact. There's many other sectors out there that are also struggling, but the 4 is our focus point. I'll talk about confidence in our economy now. The capital market and business sector make decisions on making a return on our investment that is commensurate with the risk we take. And of course, no one predicted a level 4 lockdown. Interestingly, I had a quick review of a number of our more sophisticated clients, had a look at their risk registers and their SIPOs. And unsurprisingly, there were plenty of mitigation strategies for earthquakes and other natural disasters, but of course no one could have ever imagined a lockdown. So being blindsided like this completely changes both the risk and return profile, and it is certainly not the confidence out of all of us. So key to the steering group and sector group work is that the business owners like myself believe in a positive future for Rotorua Inc, and that the business, iwi, government, communities are united in their design of our future, and this means that our strategies to get there to that future are also well understood and known, and that we're committed to them. So, speaking as a business owner, if I've got a clear picture in my mind and a pretty clear way of getting there. It provides me a level of confidence that my time, my resource, and the risks I take are actually going to be worthwhile. So, you know, this is a really important role for those sector groups to be able to paint that picture for me and my colleagues. So I'll just move on to the role of government with a small g, because you know, this is really important. So when we've had the confidence smacked out of us, sometimes you just need a big friend to help you up and dust you off. And we the business owners out there need a big friend right now. So central government has the biggest balance sheet, obviously, and they're using that to reduce the damage. And this is important leadership demonstrated by them. So the role of council is the next level in balance sheet size, but potentially local government has a higher priority in terms of local impact. That's simply because every dollar spent locally feeds more directly into our business community. And of course, everything that is done locally is more noticeable. So for example, you know, projects that were pre-COVID, lakefront development projects and so forth, in my opinion, we need to make sure that they go faster, and projects that were put out longer term need to be brought forward so that you really kickstart us locally. But I want to loop back to the need for confidence. You know, local government has a key leadership role in delivering confidence as well. Therefore, you know, Rotorua Lakes Council and the CCOs need to be seen to be very deliberate and almost relentless in leading the charge of Rotorua Inc.'s progress. It needs to ooze confidence into our community. So that's a simple and hopefully articulate outline of what I think RLC needs to be doing. So in my view, you know, it's not a time to hesitate. And I'll finish there and hand over. Thanks.
Lovely, thank you, John. I've had a little message that Mary Picker would like to just say a few words before we hand over to Taru and Peter Rice. So Mary Picker, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you, Una. I don't want to comment on what I've heard so far, but look, I would like to take the opportunity. It was remiss of me, I'm sorry it wasn't on my agenda, to welcome you, Peter, to our forum today. I know my haere Peter. I'm not sure if you're in London or if you're in Rotorua, but welcome to you, and we look forward to your contribution on the panel shortly. Thank you, Una. Kia ora. Kia ora, Peter.
All right, so I'll now hand over to Taru and Peter. Thank you, Taru.
Kia ora no tātou. E mihi ana ki a koe Trevor from Moto Tātou Karakia I tēnei ata. E mihi ana ki a koe me koutou hoki. Yeah, look, I'm going to be quick. I'm going to be about 3 minutes and hand it across to Peter. We're working in tandem here. We brought Peter in because he's been advising Te Arawa on some of the economic traffic, if you like, that we need to consider as we move forward. But actually, just very quickly, Te Arawa established a COVID-19 several days before going to Alert 4 because we could see the tsunami coming. We could see the damage. At the same time, Ngāti Whakaue, Ngāti Pikiao were already addressing, handing out kai, getting support to the kōweke, to the elders. So there was mobilization. The problem that we saw coming, was how do we actually coordinate all of this into a hub of some sort? So there was consistency in information going out. There was consistency in support. So we had enough intelligence to identify where the gaps were in all of this, and we could get help out there. So it was addressing the now amongst our people. And we have actually gathered into that hub, actually, in a number count, I think it was over 35 agencies, including Te Arawa and government agencies across the board to feed into that hub. And I have to say very, very humbly that it's come together really well at doing some great work in addressing the now. Who else is going to help us but ourselves? And what we're focusing on here, like it or not for some, is creating unity, not just amongst Te Arawa, but amongst the community and amongst the agencies and amongst government as well. So we believe that unity is key. So while we have addressed the now, we've also seen this wave come towards us, needing to look at recovery. How the hell are we going to come out of this? And if Te Arawa is not around the table, we'll find, our view was that it would be very difficult for us, unless we're around that table, to be activating together and leveraging off our will to create coordination within our community. Okay, we need each other. Tātou, tātou, it's as simple as that. So with that said, what we've done is we're also working now on coordinating a recovery plan, both in the short term, and we've got people leading that space, supported by the Te Arawa primary sector, and that's over 30 trusts and corporations, plus support of TPK, one of the government agencies that's come in to provide support. We have expert data analysis around the table because we believe data is the new oil, and it's important for us to operate off that space. So we've got really high-level intelligence pulling together a really neat GIS database system that enables us to identify where everybody is and where the problems are. That's a work in progress, but it's coming together really, really well. So we're working on that shorter term approach to look at how we can generate jobs now on the ground. Where are they? How can we do that? Through our resources and whatever other resources we can bring in. And we're very happy to work with RED in that space. Likewise, in terms of the longer term plan, we believe very sincerely, like Ghana said, it's not business as usual. It's time for transformational change in how we view our economy. And for Te Arawa, we want to make sure that we go back to those platforms that Nana has mentioned about the 4 well-beings. And one of our well-beings are focused around people, around culture, and around place, and being able to accommodate that space within whatever we do in the long term. So we've got another plan rolling down that stream. But as I've said, we want to link in and align with what council is doing. We want to link and align that as a community, we're working as a whole. Without that, I emphasize again, we're heading for some failure. So, I mean, one of the things that's come out of this as well is that as well as having steering groups and having RED and others operating, we need an innovation hub, a creativity hub, one that looks at really neat ideas that are probably off the map right now, that can be brought to the fore, that can use our minds, our intelligence, our resources, land-based and otherwise, to actually look at some really neat, off-the-wall creative ideas and get them rolling and resources. In that space as well, we brought in Peter from a Te Arawa perspective, and Peter is Ngāti Whakaue. He is actually Tuturu Ngāti Whakaue on his dad's side. He is an international banker and economist in globalization development. Now, over 20 years, he's worked with higher-end governments, he's worked with local councils, particularly in the UK, seen them rise and seen them fall. He's been through several of the major shifts in the economies around the world. And so we've invited him in to give us some guidance on the ground and translate in pragmatic terms, what does this mean to us as this tsunami comes towards us? So hopefully I'm going to switch to Peter, and Peter, hopefully you can give us some insights from your learnings as to the sorts of things we may wish to look at. Kia ora, Peter.
Kia ora, and thank you, Merepeka. Good to see you there. Right, I will get straight into it. We've got limited time. So I'm just going to do a quick run through. I'm going to read it through because I need to get this info download to you. So we already know that we've got data from countries ahead of where New Zealand is. We've got China, Korea. We've also got Sweden as an interesting element too, where they have limited lockdown, but they're all showing one thing. Populations are limiting their movements and reducing their spending even when they don't have to. So we're in for a significant and probably long-term economic crunch. And exactly as Ganesh had said, you know, this is a serious issue. I've seen the crunches that have happened through the financial crisis in the UK and in the US. New Zealand hardly got any of it, but it is brutal, and this is way worse than that. So in the context of Rotorua Lakes District, you know, we face a greater economic hit on tourism with immediate and long-term impacts on local GDP. And of course, for the council, your revenue streams. You know, one thing in favour is that we've got farming and horticulture with exports currently holding up, which is great. But the other thing to note is that prior to COVID-19, banks were already putting the brakes on farm lending. Banks are exposed to this new macroeconomic shock. We can expect, based on what we've seen previously through other crises, that lending will be highly restricted across all businesses. And we don't expect SM lending to grow at all. It will be at a standstill. You know, banks provide a really important role. They're the dominant providers of credit through to our economy. So their absence will have severe impact on our local businesses and therefore economic activity in Rotorua. With the absence of most of our usual economic flows, we've had central government and Reserve Bank doing an incredibly good job, and they have averted an economic collapse. The thing is, we roll straight into the next economic crisis with deep social implications, and this is really when we need to focus on our local economy and, of course, local council. You know, we face restarting our local economy with the loss of local businesses, We're going to have a furloughed tourist industry, higher unemployment, our local population feeling employment insecurity, spending less, and many coming out with higher debt levels. So this is where our local government, I think, must play a role, of course, with central government taking the lead. But local government's role, is to represent their communities and promoting the social, economic, environmental, and cultural well-being. And all these are important. So coordinated action of central and local government will be an important transmission mechanism for economic activity to ensure that the revenue base here does not further deplete. The experience of the financial crisis has shown us that austerity measures in a recession magnify an economic downturn. We also know that if local businesses are not supported and local infrastructure firms are not utilized, they will disappear, or at the very least, lose important skills and capabilities. And as the economy eventually resurges, that absence of capability slows the whole economic recovery. Now, I know there's concern about debt, driving up the debt levels, but you'll see that this has not stopped our governments globally from delivering massive economic stimulus. And high debt levels per se do, although they have a drag on an economy, the only other option in this scenario would be an economic collapse and prolonged depression. So all the major economies have had in the past, and some now, have had debt to GDP ratios of over 200% in times of war. And for Japan, their current debt to GDP is around 250%. And the actual issue is not the debt itself, but the management of debt. Governments, and I would include local government, given that it's, the rating is through the New Zealand government AA plus rating, government is able to borrow at very low interest rates. And we know definitely, that there is indefinitely low interest. We're currently facing a high degree of deflation. So we don't expect interest rates to come up anytime soon. So the key to having reduced these previous debt burdens is to grow your ratepayer tax base. This is how the major economies successfully were able to reduce those debt burdens in the past and successfully manage debt. The focus on use of debt is on having a society that is a high well-being with a strong social net and capital investment to grow the economy. And for our local economy, I think should be a real focus on the bioeconomy and green technologies. We also have an obligation on our communities and especially our youth. A weak local economy will weigh heavily on youth education opportunities and employment. We need an environment more than ever that actively supports youth development, training, and the council can play its part in this, as can iwi. Like many councils elsewhere in the world, collaborations between central and local government, tertiary institutions, and the private sector, and in our case, iwi, becomes vital. The development of innovation hubs, which are used across Europe, Asia, the US, and many OECD countries, become a catalyst for social and economic development. There may be a number of innovation hub subsets that focus on different missions to cover both social, business, and economic innovation. So in pure economic terms, such activity, through its high multiplier effects, has the greatest economic and social impact. It also builds local economic resilience and develops our capabilities of our people. And that's both public and private sector. And from my point of view, that will help grow the council's ratepayer base. So council's innovation role necessarily requires a different type of council. It's going to have a bureaucracy with capability to promote social and business development and deep collaboration with local stakeholders, including iwi. This is the key to how to promote successful innovation hubs. We've seen it elsewhere in the world, and there's no reason why we should change the recipe for New Zealand. As hubs take root, that's fine. Councils will probably lessen off their role. But local council are not the only players. We need local tertiary R&D establishments, iwi, private sector. They've got to raise their game and support social, business, and economic innovation. It's a collaborative effort. Innovation hubs would need contribution of skills, capital, offices, people, data, analysis to support the creation of social and business entities and facilitate the process for developing innovation of ideas and putting that into business. These skills are vital to securing grants and loan funding from central government and, of course, hopefully from our local investors. Tertiary and R&D institutions not only can support innovation, but they can grow with them. This wide variety of interested stakeholders also provides a multidisciplinary approach to innovation, and that has definitely proven to be a key to their success. So the key to having, let me have a look. There we go. So council's role. Well, it can certainly play a key role in data gathering, enhancing its own skill base, collaborating with other stakeholders, and it certainly can promote and advocate innovation with its regional and central government hubs. That's the download. Thank you.
Kia ora, Peter. Just one final comment, Una. Peter has koha this time to Te Aroha. We're working on it.
Lovely, thank you. Right, so at this stage, we're going to go into a question and answers period. So we've got about half an hour set aside, and so these are questions directed to our panel members. And so far I've got Steve with a hand up, Kepa with a hand up. So we'll start off with those two. Thank you, Steve, and then Kepa, please.
Kia ora, and thank you panelists for coming, and you really did stick to time, and thank you for that, because I think it's the questioning that is going to lead us a little bit when we get to the annual plan considerations and the future. Thank you for painting a reality check on the real picture. But my question probably is to you, Ganesh. I've heard all three speakers, or four, talk about the impact as big as the Depression. But we've caught ourselves up in a bit of the past here about, you know, stopping spending, regression, and, you know, freezing rates and things like that. And we are not looking like a united council. Can you tell us about the impact on the community as we get into the recovery phase, when they see us actually having a very difficult and different philosophical lens on a recovery? It was to you really, Ganesh.
Ganesh, you need to put,
Yep. I'm just trying to process. I think
Ganesh, before you jump in there, Steve, you sort of talked about, you know, what sort of damages out there. I'll give you just a couple of examples that have just happened yesterday and today. Tahu Holdings have announced that they're mothballing autumn. So that's across the country.
Yeah.
And today, 2 of our local large hotels have had to lay off between them 300 staff.
Yeah.
And over and above that, we all know that Te Puia laid off about 150, you know, a few weeks back. So I sort of liken it to a battlefield out there. You know, the World War I battlefield, there's a whole lot of, you know, gun smoke out there. You know, my Deloitte team are talking to the wounded who can talk and, you know, try and make some sense and help them.
Yeah.
But the reality is we don't know how many are actually casualties on that battlefield until the smoke clears a little bit. So it is unprecedented times. You know, this is nothing like any of us are hopefully we're going to see again. So that just paint a bit of context. I gave you a few minutes to think about your answer, Ganesh.
I think my response is that we can't wait for the smoke to clear, because that's going to be too late. We know it's bad. We just have to carry on. We have to decide on the basis of that. I can't see in any of scenarios, and reading through history books, the number of times we've had crises, any country that has actually succeeded by going down the austerity route. Yeah, going down the austerity, if governments start cutting spending and pretending this was somehow going to be a solution, then they're not only ignoring every lesson of history that we've had in the past, it just doesn't fit, it doesn't make sense. And that's why I say this is leadership. Government is actually the last person standing on this, if you want to use John's analogy, the last person standing on this battlefield. And unless government stands up as a leader, then we really are in for a dark future. And I would hope that that's not the future that we want to paint for our next generation. I think the thing we've got to understand for our communities today is it's not a choice between cutting back now and ending up with a better scenario in the future. If we cut back now, the scenario is even worse for the future. Okay, it's going to be bad. It's bad now and it's going to be bad in the future. We know that. There's no easy, simple picture to paint. There's no nice road. There's no happy ever after ending on the story. But what we can do, if we maintain a little bit of community cohesion, those community networks, that safety net, if you like, and that safety net for both businesses and for communities. That's why I talk about both the infrastructure as well, the expenditure as well as the OPEX. If we maintain that safety net and capture as many as we can into that safety net, that enables the future to be a little bit better, and we're able to confront that future a lot better than if we had nobody in that safety net now, if we hadn't decided to capture that, put out that safety net, because that's what we need to be involved in. And so that, it's part of that communications strategy, that narrative, talking to the community about why council does have to stand up. Okay, you've got, we do have to spend, we do have to get some income. We look at the budgets, we're going to trim the budget to, because there may be some nice to haves that we can sort of put to one side, but probably not many. We have to be realistic, but that's still going to require a rates increase. And then we put beside, then we can talk to the community about rates deferral schemes or those sorts of things. But the signal that council is still going to spend is what's the critical one. If council goes out with a zero rates, that sends all the wrong signals. Council's departing from the war battlefield as well. So that's there are other mechanisms, whether it be rates deferral, and then bluntly, in whatever 6 or 12 months, you go to central government and say, look, we played our part, we played our role, you wanted us to spend, maintain the local economy, we've done that. Now it's up for you to help us out, because whatever we do, whatever we do as local government, we've got to openly admit that central government's the ultimate funder for all of this, and that's their role at the moment. They have to be there to back up the balance sheets of local government. So I don't think, and yes, I know you have to do an annual plan, and yes, I know we've got auditors hovering over us, but realistically, we've actually got to realise the rules of the game have changed. And we've got to be, I dare say, brave and courageous enough to say, well, I won't say sod the rules of the game, but it's the 4 well-beings. And it's very nice having a nice balance sheet, but if the nice balance sheet from a financial perspective messes up our social and community balance sheets, then what's happened to our 4 well-beings? And that just makes tomorrow just that so much harder.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ganesh. Right, we've got Kepa, please, a question from you. And can you just let us know who the question is being directed to, please?
Ai, kia ora tātou, ngā mihi, kia koutou kua mihi, ka tautoko ngā mihi. So this is for all of the panelists. All of you have talked about well-being being the focus of council, and that's good. Ganesh, you've said it twice now that things aren't going to be the same, and you've also said that we weren't really very good previously at making sure the 4 well-beings were being looked after. So I want to know from the 4 panelists, what do we have in council's war chest or in local government's war chest that is fit for purpose in these times of uncertainty? And what I'm talking about here is, what tools do councils actually have at the moment that they can use to understand the implications of their decisions in this space?
Excuse me, Una.
Yes.
It's Meripeka. Una, it's Meripeka. Una, can I just ask that a question be directed, just because of time, to one of our panelists rather than to all 4 to answer, please? Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Mary Picker. So is there anything in your question then, Kepa, that you might like to rephrase and direct to one panel member?
No, I'm interested in all 4 opinions. I don't think Meripeka's suggestion is helpful.
Nevertheless, I am the chair. Thank you, Una.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kepa, look, I think that's an answer that's something for the council to answer. I certainly won't answer from Tato's perspective. Your question is anchored was the council.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with that. Thank you. We'll take the next question. Thank you, Una.
Thank you. At this stage, I don't see any hands up. So have I got any more people that wish to question our panel? I'll give you a minute or two just to have a bit of a think about framing up a question. Oh yes, we've got Sandra. Over to you, Sandra.
Thank you, Una. Perhaps I can just direct this one to Peter. It's just a question around councils using debt to continue to fund capital expenditure and perhaps whether or not OPEX. So what's your view about us going forward, increasing the level of debt if we can lock in lower levels and manage the repayments in that period of time, that we should actually increase the level to carry on spending?
Kia ora. I think Ganesh has hit the nail on the head. It really is a coordination matter between central government and local government. We will need to coordinate to get money from central government and push it through to the local economy. And therefore, council's role is really to coordinate and facilitate economic growth. I'm sure it can use its own balance sheet for certain projects that were already targeted, but it would be definitely wanting to look to central government for that sort of funding in this type of economic situation, because it's going to have its own additional costs in the social space, because that's going to get significantly worse. So as for, I think you broke up a little bit, but I think you were talking about a rates increase, is that right? Or what you do for revenue? I mean, that's probably for something for council to contemplate whether it's possible to target rates to those who actually can afford it, some form of means testing, or else some mechanism where in fact you put out rates, but you're going to have a different view on people who in fact end up not being able to pay and have to expect that you just have to write these off. You wouldn't go through your normal process of chasing and spending effort on people who just have no way of making those payments.
Well, thank you. I've got questions. Oh, Ganesh, did you want to?
I just want to add in some of the questions about funding OPEX from debt. Can I just suggest, and I'll just put it in your mind, one of the simplest things that central government could do would basically to increase the FAR rate to councils, and then that will leave some funding available for councils that are currently targeted at the local roads that will be available for the other OPEX stuff. So it's basically, it's an accounting track. Well, it's not a track, but it's a simpler way because central government's reasonably okay channeling stuff through the FAR rate and then through other things. And we've got the mechanisms to do it immediately.
Lovely, thank you. Right, I've got questions in this order, please. Eugene and then Dave, Jude, then Mary Picker, and then Sarah, please. So Eugene. You there, Eugene? You need to, yep.
Yep, just unmuted now. Yes, kia ora koutou. My question is for Peter. What I'm interested in, whilst I get the concept of the innovation hub, just to help me conceptualize that, is this a physical thing? Is it a virtual thing? What does it look like? In one of my previous lifetimes, I worked for a major corporate that had innovation as its tagline, and there were physical ways they did that and virtual ways they did that. So I'm just interested if you could encapsulate what would an innovation hub actually look like. Would it be a physical place or would it be a virtual space?
Right. Well, good examples are, from the US and the UK. They're both. So you might have, and of course it depends on the innovation, but you need a space for people to work together. So, you know, if you think of, say, Cambridge in the UK, it can be more of a virtual space because a lot of it's around, you know, software and technologies like that. But equally, when you come into the physical space, where you're looking at maybe, you know, actual bits of, you know, types of manufacturing, those things, then you will actually want a physical place. You also want a place where business people can come to get the sort of advice. So it could be a whole array of advisors, and also where it's a place where people can meet private investors. It's also a space where government, you know, is there to support those these SMEs who are either facing great difficulties and can pivot to do something new, or, you know, maybe collectively there are ideas. So it's an ideas generation space, but it requires that smart bureaucracy around it, because that's how you actually go and start businesses. It's having ideas that might be out there, formulating them into a position where you can start commercializing it. And that needs a lot of different people. So you would want a physical place to meet. Although let's, you know, and this would have to happen, of course, when COVID-19 levels have gone down to, but virtual space, it's perfect for many discussions. So you could go with that as well.
Thank you. Dave Donaldson.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And I've asked John to stop his screen so that we can hear him better. So John, my question was, I missed some of your description of the carnage that's out there right now. But when the smoke does clear a little bit, I just wonder if you can comment on the importance of council spending in the local economy, the urgency around that, and your view on whether, as the PM stated, it should be relentlessly about supporting jobs and employment. And will we hear guidance from that coming through from the steering group and the reference groups? How is that going to be communicated to council and to the community? Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Yeah, I'll try to capture. I've got 3 parts or 4 parts to it, and I'll start off with just giving again a little bit of a repeat of what I said before. Ngāi Tahu Holdings have mothballed their tourism arm. So, you know, there's obviously a lot of that flow through into Rotorua, huge impact on Queenstown as well. So that just was released this morning. 2 big, large hotels here, most recently laid off 300 staff combined. And I think we'll see other layoffs in those other big hotels around town as well, which is all about confidence or the lack of confidence that these organisations are going to have a cash flow, or even, you know, because some of these organisations, as we know, have got large balance sheets, but still not big enough to support the kind of carnage that we're going through at the moment, particularly in the tourism sector. And I'll just put that in context for a second. You know, a big news article would have been pre-COVID, big news article of a business losing 10 jobs or 20 jobs like that would have hit the front page and would have been you know, we would have been struggling with that concept. You know, it wasn't that long ago that we had, you know, the logging company down the road here lose 80 jobs at Claymar. That was big news. And now we're just glossing over the fact that we've just had 300 staff laid off and tourism, Ngāi Tahu. I don't know what the implications of that is going to be in terms of layoffs. So yeah, I'll jump into the importance of employment, because the reality is, if we don't have people employed, it does 2 things. One, it creates a lot of social problem. People lack purpose in their lives, and by all accounts, you know, all the through the youth centre studies that we've done, employment is the single most important determinant of well-being of any individual. So if you've got employment, it gives you options. It gives you purpose, you know, and it has a whole lot of flow-on effects. So employment for us is going to be very much the fourth, or should be very much the forefront of our thinking. So that's the retention of employment where we possibly can do it. And that means probably using our balance sheets to a large extent. And it means the creation of employment wherever we can possibly do it too. So, you know, it's massive in terms of how do we, you know, some of the indications are that here in Rotorua we might have somewhere between 30 and 40% unemployment rates. I hope it's not going to be that bad, but you know, that's some of the rhetoric that's going around. Queenstown probably in a slightly worse position than us. So we have to be, you know, really creative, and we have to be quick. I totally agree with, you know, Peter and Ganesh that, you know, speed is really, really important. He's dead right. You can't wait for the smoke to blow over and have a look and assess and look around and see what next. It'll be too late. We do need to move really swiftly on everything and anything that we can do. So the purpose of these sector groups is to really create, you know, confidence, create a vision, create strategy to, you know, paint a picture for us in the business community that gives us a sense of, yep, there is a future for Rotorua Inc. And yep, I'm keen to take a risk and a punt on continuing with my business, or hopefully even investing in our business. Probably that latter bit's a wee way down the track, but at least to continue and be confident that, you know, Rotorua is a good place to do business and we can continue. Now, the importance of RLC in that is so vital, because if you guys hesitate at any point, if you blink that you're not going to continue and take on the role of, yes, we believe in Rotorua Inc. As a united force, you need to all be sort of sitting there and going, we believe in Rotorua Inc. We're not going to hesitate, and we're going to go into this with full blinded bloody mercy, or no mercy, in terms of making sure that, you know, we are here to invest in our economy and support our business community. Because, you know, quite frankly, my balance sheet, you know, I've got a bit of freeboard, had a bit of freeboard, but that's not going to last me for a very long time. And I employ 50 odd staff. You know, I'm one of the bigger players around, but other places like petrol trailers, they've already downsized, their balance sheet's struggling. RFH, same place. You know, the list just goes on, and individually we are already sort of stretched and struggling. Those of us who are doing okay. Those who are not doing okay are just really, you know, there for the medic. David, did I tackle your question all right? Kapai.
There does seem to be quite a bit of chatter going on in the chat channels, and just because I'm not sure that everybody is actually using that, I might just suggest that that is a thread that we pick up after JP has taken us through the strategies, which is coming up very shortly. But I think if we could maybe just focus on asking questions direct to our panel members, and potentially ease up a little bit on the chat threads. So thank you. So next I've got questions from Jude and then Mary Pekka, followed by Sarah, Tanya and Steve, and then Phil. So thank you, please, Jude. Over to you, Jude, for a question. No? Okay, we'll go to you, Mary Pekka, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Una. Thank you. Look, I've been thinking, and thank you for the presentations so far, and also the questions from various people. We're a very diverse community, Rotorua, and we have above average young youth population in Rotorua. Many of them they'll remember from their history books the First and the Second World War, but many of them will have no idea of the the Depression years and what New Zealand and indeed the rest of the world went through. So when we're talking about sector groups and we're looking at how, you know, focusing on them and how they can contribute and make a comeback, I'm absolutely convinced that we should be looking at the sector, the youth group or the young people, the young ones, and particularly, of course, from their mental health, you know, what they're going to be going through. But Garnish and perhaps Peter, you might be able to tell me, because I also watched Greece and what happened in Greece with the young people there in the last few years. And when austerity measures hit, they were out on the streets. You'll remember that they were out on the streets. So I'm just wondering if we shouldn't perhaps be looking at strategies that really engage and try and support the youth to go through this period of time, but allow them with some of their innovative suggestions and maybe ideas to come through as well. Or should they just be lumped in with everybody else? Kia ora. Thank you. Perhaps to Garnish or Peter from their perspective.
Okay. I'm happy to start out. Look, I totally agree with you. You know, what the real risk is that they become a lost generation. And that's a real possibility. And you've raised a really good point about just the political element, because you can see, you know, the reason why the UK left Europe is because of, you know, the issue around, you know, those regions not having a say. You know, the politics become dominant in the economic discourse, and that becomes really problematic. And in fact, in that sense, the youth sort of get sidelined. So for me, the focus would be definitely on, it's all about training and education. So, you know, I'd be looking at what can we do to revamp or just fund more our local training institutions. You know, we should be pouring more effort into those things, preparing our youth. And it's not just about, you know, education to get a job, but it's also those social and cultural issues, because that strengthens us intrinsically, and they're really important. So they should be all bundled together in many ways, but I would be pushing huge amounts of effort into that, because we're looking at future innovation. You know, we also need to train and have people who have the right well-being to go forward and to be innovative. And that requires that stable, a stable economy. And that's on many fronts, including culturally. So I would be pushing more money into our education here locally.
I'd just add one extra element to that. It's not just the money and around education and training. I actually think we need to bring youth and other groups to the decision table. But otherwise, the connections out there, they actually need to feel part of, and not just feel, to be part of this decision making that we're doing here and now. And I think that's what's missing. Well, not missing, it's just the way things are structured. And if, however you structure it, however you do it, I don't know, but there's got to be a way to get that community connection, because that's what brings the buy-in for the, not just the spending, but also the debt build up and everything else. If they don't know why, they're going to be disengaged.
And might I just add, me to pick of that, you know, the youth population for Māori and the demographics for young Māori is high. Yeah, Rotorua area, and man, we're making decisions that are going to affect you know, their legacy in the future years that they're going to have to pick up. So I agree with what Garnish and what Peter is saying. Very, very important.
And I also really support what's just been said too. We're fortunate that we've got a good, strong community youth centre too that we can leverage off.
Thank you. Jude, you had a question.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you, Jude.
Oh, great. And I'm really pleased that you're picking up on the chat line, because Eugene really asked my question. I wanted to explore with Peter some of this thinking around the Innovation Hub and bringing the best thinkers together really to shape the future of Rotorua. But I see it's all being captured on the chat line. So I think it's been dealt with. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. So we've got questions from Sarah, and then Tanya, Phil, and then Steve, please. So Sarah.
Oh, kia ora koutou. My question was a little bit probably towards John. He may have some information on that, just in regards to how do you see the local, I think you might have mentioned in your presentation, the rural economy or the rural sector supporting the economy, you know, because farmers are still farming and money's still being made and cows are still being milked and all that kind of thing. How do you see the rural community supporting the broader community? And in what way can potentially we support the rural community as a council?
Yeah, well, the rural communities are a very big part of our economy, and we tend to overlook them because they sort of get on with their own business all by themselves, which is fortunate for us. And just in the last year, we're fortunate also that, you know, the milk price has been fairly strong. You know, futures were transacting at about $7.10 per kg milk solid. So, and we had a start of a good dry stock season. But, you know, they also have their struggles. You know, this year we had significant drought. It slowed down production for both dry stock and dairy. And also the milk price has slid back, and there's a whole lot of uncertainty now about what's going to happen to the milk price given what's happening overseas, as a whole lot of, you know, variables come into play. So going back to you, that's just a little bit of context to the primary sector. Oh, also don't forget trees and wood first. But within the agri horticulture sector, they're doing okay. How much they've got in terms of ability to support others is a little bit questionable. What I know a lot of the large Māori authority farms are doing, who have got good balance sheets and whatnot, are doing a lot of good work out there, such as supporting with produce, supporting with, where they possibly can, more employment, which I think is really important. One of the things, and this is where the economists can jump in, one of the things that I think all of us have noticed is that the primary sector, you know, we've called it for years and years the backbone of our country. And they have really sort of stayed there as the backbone of our country during this time, and been able to, you know, keep exports going, and also to make sure that they've got a reasonable employment flow through. And it's opportunistic for them too, which is we have, up until pre-COVID, it's been a real problem getting qualified and capable staff into the agri and horticulture sector. You know, the people just not interested in going there. And there's been a slight turnaround, you know, post this. And I imagine going forward, given our unemployment, we're actually going to see some really good people returning to the agri and horticulture sector. And what we need to do then, and this is a role that RED can play actually, is support the agri horticulture sector to, you know, create those employment opportunities going forward, and also start thinking about owning more of the value chain. And I mean that in the domestic rather than international sense. You know, we need to get them to think about, you know, value added products to get back into our own, and we start thinking about buying local. And I think buying local is going to be the theme for the next decade. All of us need to take a responsibility to, you know, buy our own produce, our food produce, our wood produce, all those sort of things. We need to be really diligent as community members to really have that, you know, stamped on our foreheads or tattooed somewhere really obvious.
Right. Thank you, John. I'm just going to cut in there. We've got 5 minutes of the Q&A panel discussion to go. And the questioning has gone a little bit off what we were originally starting out thinking about. So I'm just going to remind everybody that we were looking at the linking of what's happening around us, and then what council should be considering as we go into thinking about this annual plan development. So I've just put that back out there to see whether the up and coming questions that I've got from Tanya, Phil and Steve need to be rephrased to bring us back on track in terms of the kaupapa at the moment. So with that in mind, Tanya, then Phil, then Steve, please.
Thank you, Una. So Una, can you please ensure that we do stick to the timing as well?
Yep.
Thank you.
So so we've got 4 minutes and 3 people with questions. So if we can keep the questions pretty sharp, please. Tanya.
Thank you. I will keep them short. The first question was to John around the circular economy and the work that RED had been doing. and whether Scion fitted into this, because I know there's probably a lot of shovel-ready projects in there that can focus locally, and if there are any in there that we could be including or focusing on more in our annual plan. And the second question was to Ganesh, which is, if we use living standards as a measure of our success in the 4 wellbeings, then should council be partnering with government to use our resources, such as our staff and perhaps even our facilities like our eyesight or our library, and open those up to actually help the government take on contracts to provide social services, because I know that they will be overwhelmed in the next few months with providing relief and support to our community. So quick fire questions, thanks.
Mine will be quick. I can say that Julian Elder, who's CEO of Scion, is leading or chairing the sector group for emerging sectors, and he's also on the steering group. So we're expecting a large contribution from Scion.
Was that both your questions answered, Tanya? Yep. Phil, please.
Oh, sorry, that was just one. Ganesh is also going to answer one.
Yep, lovely. Thank you, Ganesh.
Very quickly, council needs to work with central government, but I think the biggest thing is for central government to push out the dollars. I think council knows or is better connected with the community services on the ground. And so the last thing you want is someone from Wellington to reorganise it. Provide the facilities, yes, but and make sure central government pays for it.
Cool. All right. I'm going to take one more question, and then we're going to wrap up the Q&A panel and move ourselves on. So Phil, you're the lucky last question for this stage. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that. Hey, look, it's just a quick question, and it's either to Peter or Ganesh. You both talked about going to central government to fund our larger projects, but we also, as a council, have a lot of smaller projects on our annual plan and our long-term plan. They may be the sorts of things that are done by our, our small companies. Do you think it is worthwhile using perhaps temporary debt funding by council to support those smaller projects employing local people rather than cutting down our spending? So really things that we may not get central government funding for, but are still things we have been looking at doing. Should the council be looking at funding those out of increased debt?
I'll keep it short. Categorically, yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you very much. That brings the questions and answers of the panel to the end. Now, I would like to ask Mary Pekka if she would just like to do some wrap up and a thank you to our panel presenters, please.
Yes, certainly. I'm most happy to thank our panelists. It has been so enlightening. Look, most of us have seen around the country in the last wee while armchair economists coming out of the woodworks left, right and centre, little in the way of experience, but picking up from just, sort of like going online and thinking, yeah, well, that's going to be a valid solution. And it's really lovely to have people. There's no substitute for somebody who has been there, done that over many years. So to Ganesh and to Peter, thank you particularly, and also to John, thank you for the opportunity to have you with us this afternoon, for giving us your expertise and that solid background in this area, and we're certainly the beneficiaries of it. And as I heard someone say, we're not going to depart this battlefield. We know it's a battlefield, and we know it requires courageous leadership, and certainly that's what we want to have here, signalling to our community that tough times, and it does call for tough leadership, and you've given us a good steer as to our role as local government as we go through these trying months ahead of us. So thank you to our panelists. It's been so enlightening, and thank you so much indeed. Kia ora, thank you.
Thank you. Right, so our panel members are free to leave now and get to other meetings and that, should they wish. So just again, thank you very much for all the interactive discussion today. It was very, very worthwhile. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, so at this point, we're going to move into looking at the implications for the 2020-21 annual plan. JP is going to present this, and I'm just going to whip up a shared screen. So JP will turn his mic on and I'll bring up the screen. So hopefully this works. There we go.
Brilliant. Hey, thank you very much, Una. So, councillors, I've just got in front of you a sort of a diagram which is intended to really pick up and enable us to work through what's the second part of the paper that we had. So councillors, you know, one of the things we had here, and it really sits to the left-hand side of the diagram. We've taken a decision around the Rotorua Economic Recovery Plan, the Build Back Better. So that was done on the 1st of April. So what will we do to support a recovery? And particularly when we're still sitting in a situation where the future is really unclear. So for those of you who participated in the number of workshops that Una and Thomas facilitated prior to the COVID lockdown, you know, we were very much working in the normal local government manner. We were systematically looking at what we had put into our long-term plan, slicing off this particular year and talking about what has changed across that year and what will that mean for variations around our consultation document. Well, really what's happened now is all of that has gone out the window. So what we're trying to do, because we do have some limited time now, is really to sharpen that process up and really put before you some guiding strategies for us to reset that annual plan and that consultation document. So really for us, it's what will our planning approach be for this annual plan? So we need your guidance, and we need to take some decisions today around those guiding strategies as to what we need to do to reshape that annual plan budget, program, and the consultation document that needs to go out in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So that's really the purpose for this, for the second part of the session, and why we really thought it was important to give you that first part about some of that background thinking about the complex, rapidly changing world we've got at the moment, and how in a local government context do we translate that into a good plan, but a plan that also has the flexibility for us to keep working forward successfully. So really that's what the purpose of this second part is, councillors. So really, as you can see there, we're at that middle circle in the middle. This session is about agreeing or talking about those guiding strategies to shape that annual plan budget, program, and the consultation document. So really the second part of the paper that you had been given was really a case of, you can see there in the right-hand side, the 8 bubbles around the circle there. That's really the intention then to say, those were those strategies we're quite keen to talk to you about. So the one difference from the paper is I'm just going to go through them in a slightly different order, councillors, than how it was presented in the paper. So I've really much started this time round with what was sort of, I suppose, strategy number 2, which is cushioning the blows around rates. So obviously also at the meeting we had on the 3rd of April, you made some decisions around rates postponement for that 4th quarter of this financial year. So clearly and without question, we're going to have to consider carrying forward the similar sort of postponement arrangements and making them available to those who are in distress economically into this coming annual plan as well. So we've still got a major part to think about how we manage that blow for those most affected. So we will have to certainly carry that forward. Now, I think when you received that on the 3rd of April, Thomas would have talked a lot about rates remission starts compromising our revenue, where rates postponement gives us the chance to work with those involved to actually postpone it, but it also doesn't as adversely impact on our longer term revenue streams, which is pretty important considering we are still likely to see a whole bunch of other impacts from our normal revenue streams, from grants and from user pays and user charges coming in. So those impacts are still going to be quite heavy on the organisation. The other piece too about rates relief targeted to those who are seeking a postponement or have accessed the government schemes is also that it meets the 3 T's principle. So really that's for us that being very much temporary and targeted. So really important principles for us to carry into this process. Now the second strategy there, councillors, is around a prudent approach to rating. So we've had a lot of conversations here about, and a lot of people trying to bully along the same sort of conversations that had been had previously. Council's too big, government should be small, it's another form of taxation that should be reduced. Perfect time to recut the same arguments to say now's the time to cut local government and government as small as possible and to focus just on essential services. Now, Council, you remember through some of those workshops that we had when we were originally talking about a rate increase of about 8.2%, about 70% of that increase was related to wastewater, water and refuse collection. So when we go back to what was driving rates rises, it was some of those essential services that we've been focusing on. So one of the things we've just got to balance here, councillors, is yes, there is a number of things we can do to reduce organisational cost, but it's important to keep in mind some of those are temporary and cannot be sustained out into later years. But equally, we just need to look at those very carefully. So really a strategy there is to say, how do we minimise the rates increases, but we still have to make sure we're not undercutting our essential services or creating an organisation that's not got the sustainability or the capacity to support some of the other strategies we're going to talk around moving forward. So the next one there, and it was really good to hear the panel's kind of conversation in this space. So one of the things there that's quite important is making sure that we're resourcing our ability to work successfully in partnership, whether that's directly with government, Te Arawa and business, as we've said here, on shaping some of those objectives. But I think we heard quite strongly back from the panelists, there's also that necessity to make sure that that includes wider community groups, youth, getting that wider perspective into being really successful in how we move forward. So one of the things that we might have to look at really carefully is what kind of resourcing are we putting to RED. Clearly their business model has shifted because they had an eyesight and a focus on supporting particularly the tourism industry with a lot of their staff. But now when you think about their other function, which is economic development, are they right-sized? And in this time where there needs to be some really significant conversations in our community, have we got the right volume of people, volume of resources to really successfully have those conversations? So resourcing for that economic recovery planning is going to be critical to our success moving forward. Investing directly in recovery. So I think this is that split that Ganesh made between talking about the OPEX, which was the previous one, and potentially the CAPEX discussion. So recommencing existing capital projects because our spending is important to local contractors and the allied suppliers and the many families that sit behind that. So that's really important for a base load of council expenditure going back and around through our community. Going to talk about the SIP project. So that was that Crown Infrastructure Partnership projects later on. But just on a separate tack, one of the things that Ganesh had said to us was, you know, there needs to be that conversation with government about getting funding quickly to support that local spending. So one of the things that's going on at the moment as part of this recommencing projects is that government has a lot of contracts with us already. So they have the Provincial Growth Fund where we have 3 and 4 year contracts around the forest, around the lakefront and around the museum project. So one of the conversations that Jocelyn's been leading straight away is government's preparedness to almost give us all of the funding up front. So that's a way of saying, look, we want you to commit to restarting these existing projects, get on with them, show the confidence, get the people working, and to assist that, we'll put our money up front so that it helps you in this time when we've got this reduced revenue. So there's a couple of pathways there. I think Phil asked a very good question about the little projects. Again, this is our chance to make sure that when we work effectively, we're supporting those smaller businesses. So that's really good as well. So the next one, councillors, is prudent use of debt. And in the presentation slide there, we've got underlined the word consider, because clearly we highlighted some of the challenges that had come through from council's response during the GFC, where rates were artificially held back, but there was no plan to recover from that. So it left council in a situation where some of that OPEX debt funding continued when it shouldn't have. So we might have to put in front of you as part of this plan option, consider whether there's some opportunities for one-off debt that should be appropriate for you to consider. The other one too is, and I think all of the panelists, and we've tried to repeat it and highlighted it, and things like the McKinsey stuff and actually the Treasury stuff is the same. There is a massive range of views as to what the actual scenario of the future is going to be. And so we need to keep our adaptability here. So one of the things is, while we put forward our annual plan capital expenditure program or list of projects, we will also have to think about how we just keep looking at them regularly through the year to either speed up, throttle back, or change the pace if the circumstances and the situations change in the future. So really important that we recognise this is not a plan to go 1 July and we just roll it out. There will be a constant review of what's happening out there and whether we need to change it. I think Tanya raised a really good point, and it relates to that emerging wider impacts, and same with Ganesh highlighting that issue around we're in unprecedented times, and some of those impacts, particularly in those other well-beings, may not be evident at the moment. I think about our role we took with Ngongataha floods, where we coordinated navigators. Look, as part of this exercise, working with MSD, we may have to take on a different role and provide some different support. So again, we just need to understand what's happening in the community and be ready to adapt our own business model to support big government with little government, to make sure that we actually get the support and the services for our community. And look, the last one, which I think is critically important, and I've moved it to the back rather than the front, is our direction. You know, we have a very clear purpose stated in the Local Government Act. So that's our Bible, that's our direction, that's our stake in the ground. That is our responsibilities as local government, and it is around the 4 well-beings. And for us, it's articulated in Vision 2030, our goals, our strengths, and the focus we've put into our community. So as Ganesh would say, don't lose sight of your kaupapa in this really absolutely traumatic time when we're standing somewhere in no man's land. We've got to think about what we're trying to achieve in the longer term. So councillors, that's pretty much a quick run through of those 8 strategies. Is just say we're looking for you to hopefully confirm those as the right approach for us to reshape what we were doing around the annual plan budgets and consultation document, so we can bring that back to you reasonably quickly.